So I want to just bring Ursula out and start the Q&A right away, because I'm sure many of you have questions.
Thank you all so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed the film, and thank you again to Susan and Boston American Film Festival. I wanted to ask that Bobby didn't come up and join me on stage. Bobby, if you remember the film as the dentist and the coach. And I wanted to open the audience right away and ask if anyone had any questions. Okay.
I enjoyed the film very much. I thought it was very well shot. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the aesthetic of the film, shooting it 4x3.
Well, a lot of people have questioned my decision to use 4x3, which is the smaller, old-fashioned frame size. And part of it was that I am an old-fashioned girl, and I was watching TV on a tube TV when I started making this film, so it felt very natural to me. But part of it also felt like very much mirroring the spirit of Chinatown and Nine Man, which is it's a little bit old, it's a little bit new. I mean, we're heading in the direction of square right now. Everything's being done on Instagram, so the new frame size is actually very square. So it felt both vintage and the fact that it matched all of the old footage and also new at the same time. So hopefully nobody minded that it didn't fill all the way to the corners. Nobody has questions for this guy?
Yeah, why do you gotta curse so much?
Because I played with you, you idiot.
Is there a question over here?
This is Bobby's first time seeing the film, by the way. So I guess my question for him, if you guys don't have questions first, is how did it feel? And you can be honest with me.
I think it felt good, not so much for me, because I've been in many films before. No, but honestly, I mean, to honor someone like Reggie, guys like Ty and Paul in Washington, and the old timers, Henry Oy and Arthur Wong, Jimmy, I knew those guys, and Ronald Reggie's brother. I mean, their efforts and actually their life and my life and my kids' life will hopefully be perpetuated by this. We're going to try to use this vehicle to help us get really sustained better funding and big funding, because now instead of like a small bunch of teams, the last tournament in Vegas was about 110 teams, the men and women, in 3 days. The budgets are astronomical, and now we have to do things like now we buy insurance, things like that in case someone gets hurt, and I think it's going to really help us, and we really appreciate your effort in doing this.
A lot of people had the question, we've only screened this 3 times before, and most people wonder whether or not it actually went to Vegas, and the answer is yes. The tournament actually went to Vegas this year. So you're the first audience to know the answer to that question.
What about
Alicia.
next year?
Next year's in New York.
Congratulations, Ursula. I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about how you decided to follow this story and why you decided to stay on the East Coast teams. Did you cover at all any of the West Coast teams?
Yeah, there's actually footage in here that is from the West Coast. Some of the stuff at the end, and all those overhead shots are actually from an LA tournament. And I actually had intended to follow the season that the tournament ended up in LA, because that was the first time they've had it in LA ever, or for a very long time. And but I couldn't get the money together and the team together quickly enough, so it ended up being the next year, which was Boston. I focused mostly on the East Coast teams in the build-up to the seasons, because the East Coast teams are actually much stronger communities in Nine-Man. The West Coast teams tend to have players that sort of come in and play for the tournaments, but they don't have the year-round, summer-long support. And DC and Boston have some of the strongest, most united Chinatown communities, and perhaps that is because they're some of the smallest Chinatowns. So the communities really feel the need to band together. The question about how I came to the story, sort of a little bit complicated. I came to Nine-Man, the space of Nine-Man, because I played volleyball, and I ended up on a team that had a lot of Chinese women who invited me to play Chinese on a Chinese team.
Because you were tall.
Yeah. And sort of being in this women's Chinatown team led me to see Nine-Man and understand Nine-Man. And early in my career, it was actually a sports journalism and a major mainstream publication, and it was the kind of story that didn't get to see light in those kinds of publications. They're interested in sports like football, basketball, hockey. And so I had waited a long time. The tournament goes to a new city every year, and I was living in New York, and I came through New York like twice or 3 times, which means like 7, 14 years. And the year I decided I wanted to make this, the national tournament had come to New York again, and I said, nobody still has done this story. I thought I was gonna let somebody else do the story, and it's gone so many cycles without being documented that I think now it's actually my obligation to document it. As you can see, the oldest members of, well, the oldest living 9-man players are pretty old. So I couldn't wait another 7 years for it to come back around in order to make the story.
What's your experience like being a female filmmaker and, you know, shooting a film that's so hyper masculine? And I guess this is a question for you as well. How's working with Ursula? How's that experience?
He always has a zinger, so I'll hand him the mic first.
How's it feel to stand next to a real man?
I wasn't so aware that I was a woman in this space for a long time because I had worked in sports in almost these all male environments, so it felt very normal for me to be around all these guys. I've been in locker rooms before and very comfortable with that space, but it did occur to me somewhere along the way that it was, maybe I should not have made this film sort of 95% by myself because I am a woman, and that definitely changes things. I think what it did allow me to do is get closer to people in some of the more intimate moments, but perhaps there was fewer jokes about women and all the sort of body stuff that normally goes on. But I think that was still fairly represented in the film. At some point, if they have enough beers, they'll say anything to anybody, really.
I think this is the PG version of it. I think it got pretty nasty sometimes, you know, especially with our interviews.
If anybody wants to see the outtakes with Bobby, just let me know.
Thanks so much. That was really interesting. I have a quick question. Should be targeted to both of you. I wanted to know if you could comment on the changing stereotype of how the sport started in a different generation, and as there were all these rules about who can participate, like how is that going to change the future of the game?
As of this month, I think we are, actually this year, we should be fully incorporated to our bona fide national organization, will be the North American Chinese Volleyball Association. We'll be going from the rules, venues, sponsorship, and one of the things that will be set up are going to be committees that will seriously look at the future of the game and how the eligibility requirements are going to be, and that's, I'm going to leave it to some other people. It's a very tough subject. It's something that I really don't know the answer with. I just go with the flow, and we don't know where this game is going to go. We, like many people in there, we like to keep it pure, but at the same time, the changing demographics. I mean, if we select close to the full eligibility requirement, half my team will be done. You know? So seriously, it's right, Doug. Right? Doug here is one of my players. He's the last of my great white hopes. You know.
That was also my brother's nickname, I think, when he played, right? Oh no, they called him Vanilla.
Vanilla Ice.
Yes, Bobby has a nickname for everybody on the team. I think on the first day of every season, he makes the rookies wear white shirts and then decides what he wants to write as their nickname on the back of it because he can't possibly remember everybody's names. But Vanilla Ice and What Great White Hope are fairly easy to remember. That question gets asked a lot. I mean, people ask me what my opinion is on the eligibility rules, and I think that part of the film was to ask people to think about that on their own. I mean, it's not as black and white as people would like to think, and hopefully some of the history of exclusion and the experience of Chinese American men today contributes to your thinking about whether or not those rules are fair. I think that in the community it's very divided. I think people believe you know, both sides, and I think that it's constantly being debated within the community, which is great. And there are participants that are non-Asian that are playing at practices and participating and giving to the community all the time. They happen to not necessarily play at the tournaments, but this year in Boston, I think for the first time they had an open tournament which invited players of all types to play in a sort of a smaller off-season kind of thing. And there was a team called the Polar Bears, which, as you might imagine, was mostly white, that had, I think, some Asians on the team. And for some people, that's a way to spread the game, is to invite other people in, and for others, in order for the game to be maintained, it needs to be kept a little closer.
I was just curious, you mentioned that you play volleyball. Is there other equivalent women's 9 women?
There are not 9-man women's teams or 9 women teams. There is a parallel league that plays women's regular 6-person volleyball alongside the 9-man. It was very complicated to get into that in this film because there's so many other things to touch upon. But women participate. There are a few. I've seen a few play in tournaments when they don't have enough players. They might play in the back row.
But, to address that, Reggie Wong was the first person tournament director to bring women into the tournament. So he's a pioneer in that respect. It was 6 persons because that was the traditional volleyball that everyone's used to. But part of the committee, the national committee, there's talk about as the tournament has grown and you have 110 teams between the men and women, we might start to think about requiring the women's division to start playing 9-person volleyball too, to keep it consistent.
But it's not easy, one of the things I wanted to sort of distinguish is that volleyball and 9-man are different games. Like I played volleyball for a long time, I could not get on a court and play 9-man. So there's definitely a learning curve if women start to be included. There were a few times in New York where they've tried to host a 9-woman tournament and not enough teams showed up, not enough women showed up. So there are some obstacles to all of that.
We've got time for one more question, if anyone has a really quick.
The final play of the championship game, Toronto playing that San Francisco touched the ball. You guys have it on video, so what happened?
We do have it on video. And that's all I'll say. We still haven't shown in Toronto, so oh yeah?
Actually, one last question. Ursula, would you actually say a few words, sort of what's next for the film and where, this is going? And I think, obviously this screening is sold out and there are still folks in Boston who do want to see it. And we actually, as a community, have gotten requests from other organizations that are interested in possibly doing additional screenings throughout the year. So, I mean, obviously we're still in this to help you and we'll help make those connections and there'll be other screenings too. But, tell us about DVDs, broadcasts.
Oh, no. We've got my dean from the dental school, Dr. Norris is here, right? The dean, and Barbara Rubel, community relations from Tufts. We could put it at Tufts. It's an auditorium with 500-600 seats, right? Free of charge.
You guys, if anyone wants to stay in touch with 9-man, we're on social media at 9mandoc. We have a website, 9-man.com. We can send you updates on everything. Right now, the film is doing a festival tour, which means that we're hoping that people will come together in a space like this to see the film. I think it's actually a very special experience to see it in a group with the community. I think that Asian Americans have gotten very used to watching things on their computers, but you in the room know that there's a difference. There's energy in this room that wouldn't be there if you were sitting in front of your computer. So I hope you'll send your friends out to the screenings coming up. We have 7 other cities coming up in November and early December. We have Toronto, Philly, Austin, Texas, Hawaii, San Diego, I might have forgotten something else, New York City, and we hope that send your friends out to those screenings. And we will let you know when the DVDs are ready, and we will let you know when we have a broadcast ready to tell you about. And I also wanted to mention that we'd like to continue this conversation and invite you all to the Corner Pub, which is featured in the film. It's between the Arch and the and South Station, and if you go, I promise nobody will tip your car over.
It's Weggie's Pub. Weggie's Pub. It's Reggie's old pub.
So please join us there afterwards for a little bit of a post party. Thank you all for coming.